blocks with landscaping and trees between buildings, as well as buffer between the pedestrian and cycle path along the NDR. And the third floor level for each block has been incorporated into the eaves of the roofs to reduce the overall perceived height of the buildings and create a high quality street scene along the NDR. The apartment blocks proposed fit well within the surrounding context that has already been approved. As Sophie Morris touched on, the proposed access off Matthews Green Road to the private drive originally proposed in phase 5 has been removed. There were 3 access points shown off Matthews Green Road that were approved as part of the outline consent, and only one will now be delivered as part of the Matthews Green scheme, and that's already been implemented into phase 1. This change is in response to neighbours' concerns about traffic and highway safety along Matthews Green Road, as well as concerns from officers about loss of hedgerows along that stretch. So phase 5 will now be accessed via the phase 4 internal roads from the NDR running through the Matthews Green site. The removal of the proposed access off Matthews Green Road has allowed Bovis to create a new public open space in phase 5 to the southern part of the site, and ensure there's a significant 15-metre landscape buffer along Twyford Road, as then stretches around to Matthews Green Road. In the original master plan, we had 1,900 square metres of open space within phase 5. With the revised layout of phase 5 following the no, just to say, so overall the revised open space allows for an increase of open space, and there's overall there's 12,000 square metres of open space proposed across phase 4 and phase 5.
On to speakers, just to clarify, I think you're probably all aware of this, but just to make sure we are, that the reason the extra care home is not coming forward is it is no longer required by the council. So this is the council's request that is removed, which is obviously given the applicant an opportunity to deliver some additional homes. We also heard that there will be an increase in the percentage of affordable homes delivered on site. You're probably aware that from the report that the Town and Parish Council raised a particular point which has been addressed. That's the need for an additional road, which is now been agreed is not required. There are no comments from local members. We do have comments from Embrook Residents Association, and 600 neighbouring properties were consulted on this, and 5 have responded with objections, and again some of those have been addressed through the report. So we'll come straight onto the speakers, and I'll call Stephen Conway first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is obviously an application that's reserved matters. It's the principle of development's already very well established. This is just one of or 2 phases in that large North Wokingham SDL that's coming forward. I don't have any particular objections to what's being proposed, but I would like to take this opportunity, if I may, to raise an issue that has concerned me since I've returned to the Council in May, which is the need to recognise that this development, the whole of this development, not just the development we're considering this evening, is going to create additional pressure on Twyford Station. And most of the residents who are going to be commuting into London are probably not going to battle their way into the centre of Wokingham to get an inferior service. They're going to drive up to Twyford to get a better service. So something I've been pressing for since I rejoined the council, and I hope I could get some reassurances on this evening, is that we might use developer contributions to secure a shuttle bus service to try and reduce the number of car journeys up to Twyford, and also to reduce the problem of parking at the station and in the immediately surrounding area. This is an opportunity, it strikes me, to try and address this problem for people in my own ward, and for people who are trying to use Twyford Station generally. So I think I turn to Judy here really to ask whether she can tell me anything about whether this is included in the council's plans.
So this was included at the outline application stage. We secured £535,000 from Bovis towards public transport services. It was quite loosely worded in the Section 106 agreement, so there's the potential to have a loop that runs through the site and comes back down to the town centre and the railway station. But there was also discussion at the time that, like you say, there was a real opportunity to have some sort of bus service up to Twyford. So it's kind of, you know, being assessed by our public transport team as to what they use the money on, but we've certainly borne that in mind. And there is a bus stop just adjacent to the application that is going in next year, which would obviously pick up anybody that wanted to travel in the direction of Twyford. I think it's just sort of shown on that plan on Twyford Road itself. So it's we have thought about it.
Stephen, could I make a suggestion that obviously because the 106 agreement is something that has already been decided, so to some extent our hands are tied on that, but I could suggest that we should perhaps include an informative as part of our decision, that we would encourage the council and the applicant to work together to see whether additional links could be provided to encourage use of public transport. Would that be something that might go some way towards addressing your concern?
I'd very much welcome that, Chairman. What I'm keen to see is a bus service that's regular enough and efficient enough to be used. Obviously, if we have a bus service that is once an hour, then nobody's going to use it. So I think we really do need a bus service, particularly in this case, that's effectively a shuttle bus in the rush hour period, very regular services. So if I may raise that point, but I would certainly support the idea of an informative.
Informative could suggest that it needs to be a peak hour rather than necessarily all through the day to encourage that form of use. Coming from part of the borough that enjoys a bus service once a week, I'm very aware that the need for improved bus services in parts of the borough. Okay, Rochelle, I think you were indicating next.
Well, I do like the idea that we are going up, we increase affordable homes, we're not going up to 35%, which would be what we ideally like. But also the fact is that we are double-decking the park and ride in Winnish, and there is a proposal for a Twyford shuttle bus coming from the park and ride. So that may be useful for these residents.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to comment on and ask questions about three issues. The first has been largely addressed in the slide presentation, but I think it's still worth noting. There are a number of references to concerns about the appearance of the apartment blocks, including the scale and their potentially homogeneous appearance. I note that a number of changes have been made to soften the appearance, including incorporating windows at third floor level into the eaves of roofs, moving to two different designs and repositioning some blocks further back from the NDR. However, I was disappointed on this occasion that we weren't provided any side elevations, any pictures showing side elevations like the ones that we saw in the slide presentation. I would have found that very helpful if it had been done in our pack. Secondly, the outline planning permission required a total overall 35% of affordable provision that included a commuted sum for some off-site provision. If approved, the on-site provision would rise to 26%, which I believe is above what's required in the Section 106 agreement. However, it seems to me that we are often being asked to approve applications that allow for significant off-site provision of affordable housing. And I think we need more information about the medium and longer-term potential consequences of this. I say this just as something for the committee to ponder at another stage. Notwithstanding, I am concerned that the existing Section 106 agreement for a 70-30 split between social rented units and shared ownership will not be adhered to, and I would like some elaboration of the reasons for this proposed change. Thirdly, in relation to informative 3, commitment to using local labour and contractors where possible, whilst I applaud this, However, I appreciate that this is not something that can be considered by us when reaching our decisions tonight, but I would appreciate a brief explanation of how this is monitored and enforced.
I think from your 3 points, I think you've agreed that the first point has largely been covered. Okay, so Conor, could you comment on the affordable housing split, please, 70-30?
Yeah, so the affordable housing split, we have a starting point. We have a design guide and policy that sets out the percentage, 35%, and then the split. On most sites, what we'll do is we'll speak to our housing team, get advice from them in terms of the requirement and the needs for the day. On this site, we looked at various options, various sliding scales within that, and our housing team advised that is an appropriate mix for this development. It's not something we'd apply blanketly across, but at this current time, that mix actually suits the need in the area. So that's where we've ended up at this mix. So it's based on advice from our housing team, who obviously know what's going on in terms of the waiting lists and that. So that's where we take our decisions from. Yeah, so local labour, we have actually a team within the council that look to promote things like local labour. So in essence, it looks at apprenticeships, it looks at all those various options for employment and training. Where we can, we impose, this was before the days that we imposed conditions and sometimes the Section 106 payments towards apprenticeships and local labour. It's a bit of a sticky issue because obviously there's a freedom of movement of labour and people, so it's a difficult one to do. But where we can, we work with the team within the council, work with the local developers, whether it be Bovis, the national ones or the smaller ones, to try and encourage them to take local people, to give them apprenticeships to work through the system. So as a council, we work towards local people first in terms of trying to train them up and get them employment, but there is a limit to what we can do. So there is actually a team. I'm happy to have a chat with you or send you on the details of the person who's over that if you want to have a more detailed chat after. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to mention a couple of comments, really. Top of page 35, where it's talking about the affordable housing, you won't be surprised to hear. Just the language that's used at the top there, paragraph 45, the existing S106 agreement secured a 70-30 split between social rented units and shared ownership. That feels misleading to me because the chart below, table below, clearly shows that wasn't the case. It wasn't secured. So I think it's important to write these documents in a way that the truth is there clearly, but that was a bit of a misnomer, I think. And that is something that has concerned me before and concerns me here, but I won't labour the point. There is an increase in affordable on this site, so I'm not going to moan too much. One other thing is a comment on page 23, which is from Embrook Residents Association. This is just an observation, really. They're talking about there being 3-storey blocks of flats, and then saying they consider that this area would take on the character of a flatted development ghetto, reminiscent of the worst examples of 1970s, 80s developments. I spent part of my childhood living in a ghetto like that. I wouldn't call it a ghetto, but of 4 blocks of 12-storey flats in Salford. And I'd love to say that WBC is allowing that kind of thing to go on here, but I can't see that happening in this development somehow. I think they're probably pushing it a little bit with those comments. So I'd point that out.
I think the other point that's probably missed is that I think there's a 17-metre width between the blocks on each side of the road. So, and as we heard from the presentation, the separation between them has been adjusted to allow some planting between them as well, so that you don't get this monolithic block of units. And obviously, compared with your experience in Salford, I think it's now. Okay, I see no one else indicating they wish to speak, so I'm going to try and draw this one to conclusion. Members, I just draw your attention to the top of the members' update, where you're seeing there's a slight amendment to the recommendation where it says replace public open space area plan. It's a technical piece there, but we also talked earlier about having an informative to encourage them, and I've just quickly noted some words. I see whether members would support this, that the informative should be along the lines of: the committee encourages WBC and Bovis to consider peak hour public transport links between the site and Twyford Station. Can you use your microphone?
Could we add just a few words, Chairman, that indicates that we're looking for frequent services within peak hours rather than just one? So, I mean, I like this term shuttle bus because it does imply that you arrive, you turn around and you go back, which is actually almost certainly what's required.
However, I think using the term public transport links gives more flexibility, because I think you would also agree anything would be an improvement over what there is now.
Although this is an opportunity to try and get an improvement that I think would be very, very welcome. So I hope we can just put something in that indicates that we want a frequent service.
So I've reworded it as such: the committee encourages WBC and Bovis to consider frequent peak hour public transport links between the site and Twyford Station. Okay, good. I'm proposing that. Would you like to second that?
Could I just amend it?
You could amend it. Well, we don't want to get too hung up on this one. So.
It doesn't actually say what the purpose is. I mean, the purpose.
Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go straight to the vote. Could members please indicate whether they can support application 191949? And that is unanimously approved. Thank you, members. Now move on to Silverstock Manor. I'm hoping that we can go through this item very quickly. Members, the reason I suggested that we will probably be able to handle this particular item quite quickly is that two things. Firstly, it's a previously approved application that has lapsed through the period of time. And the second, that you will note that it is simply for an extension on a house. So it's not controversial. There are no objections from anybody. The only reason it has to come to the committee is because it's an unusually large plot, and it's because it's over a hectare in size, and therefore it has to come to the committee. So, Andrew, if you could just give us a quick run through this application, please.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. This is application to extend the existing dwelling, and it's been approved, or the same proposal has been approved 3 times before. whilst the proposed extension is considerably larger than the existing dwelling and would effectively become a main or dominant part of the house in its appearance, the resulting dwelling would appear entirely acceptable in its context, given the spacious nature of this residential plot. This is shown on page 55 of your agenda, with the elevation in comparison to the photograph of the site as you've got on the overhead here as well. Therefore, the proposal would not result in excessive encroachment within the countryside, nor an inappropriate expansion of development away from the original buildings on site in accordance with CP 11. Adequate parking and amenity can be provided on site, and there is no resultant ecology impacts or impacts on neighbours. One further thing, which wasn't in your update report, apologies for that, but in addition, I would also recommend further informative to note that the residential curtilage of the site, and that should read, notwithstanding the red line on the submitted location plan, the council considers that not all of the site is within residential curtilage. And on that basis, we'd recommend approval with conditions.
So as I say, members, we have nobody registered to speak, no objections on this one. Are there any? Yep, there are issues. Firstly, I would like to come to the ward member first on this. Angus?
Not my ward. But as I have the floor, I will continue.
The nearest thing to the ward member. Okay.
I can see, because it's been approved before, there's nothing we can do. I'm just surprised that, taking that this is in the countryside, it was originally given permission for such a large addition in the first place. But that doesn't affect what we do tonight.
I just had a question, actually. Item number 24, it says it's subject to SIL. I just wondered what that... I was surprised it being a single house and subject to SIL. Just wondered if somebody could explain that.
Andrew, could you just explain why this is still
Yes,
liable in terms of scale?
It would be over 100 square metres and therefore is liable for SIL.
Okay, I see no other members indicating, so we will take this one to the vote. Could I just remind members, could I actually ask you again, Andrew, just to read out the informative that you would like to add to the two informatives already on page 53, just for clarity for members.
Notwithstanding the red line on the submitted location plan, the council considers that not all of the site is within residential curtilage. And the reason why we're suggesting that is you can see on the eastern side of the site there were some previous buildings which were part of the original farm there, and I think while most of the site is probably within residential curtilage, there's a question mark over that. So
I think the informative makes it very clear that it's no longer ambiguous. Members, could you please indicate whether you're able to support planning application 192285? And that is also carried unanimously. Thank you, members. And we now come on to, be best to describe them as linked applications. They are separate applications for the Homestead, Park Lane, Charville. We will take them separately because they are for different things, but since much of the site and the matters of concern will be covered in the first one, I suspect we can handle the second item more quickly. So firstly, straight over to Simon, who's going to take us through this application. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for 3 warehouse buildings, attached warehouse buildings, shown in blue on the attached screen here. It's at the rear of the existing site, which comprises a B1 and B8 use. It's currently occupied by a Better Service, which is a waste removal and drainage business, in addition to several other businesses, one being a film hire company and a vehicle hire company. The application clearly is retrospective. It involves the retention of 3 warehouse buildings and the associated parking and turning area in front of it. Also on the site, along the northern side, are 6 caravans, which have been given permission in 2017, a dwelling at the front of the site. The remainder of the site is, the balance of the site is occupied by a better service. The application was consulted to neighbours, and Parish Council, Charville Parish Council, have objected. It is also, the ward member has also raised concerns. The two issues that are a contention here is the intensification of the site and the traffic impacts that arise onto Park Lane, being this road here. At the top of the screen, you'll note the edge of the school, and the building on the western side of Park Lane is recently approved at appeal, additional residential accommodation. The Great Western Railway line runs to the south of the property. There's no objections raised on either the traffic or intensification of the site. Condition C5 of the agenda does limit the hours of use, being consistent with the existing hours of use for the site. Paragraph 28 of the agenda also deals with the traffic implications of the proposal. There's two relevant consents from the previous applications on the site, limiting the number of movements to and from the site and the number of vehicles that can be parked on the site. This application doesn't seek to alter those in any way. Any departure from those would be subject to enforcement action. The only other issue here being it is located in the countryside. The application is acceptable in terms of its relationship with policy CP11, despite a departure from the intent of the aims of that. The intent of that policy being no additional development in the countryside. Condition 2 requires landscape softening along the edge with the railway line, this being the only vantage point from the site. The only other point worth noting is that this is a resubmission of a previous application that was refused. The application has been re-evaluated against additional policies of the MPPF and an argument put forward by the agent following discussion with the enforcement officer. The application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. And we've got Emma Hobbs, the Borough Councillor for Charville, who wishes to speak against this item. Evening, Emma.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say that I absolutely have no objection to Mick Bignell's businesses at all. I know him extremely well. My main concern, and I'd like to speak on behalf of both these applications, is the size of the business that is growing, which is, I think, is brilliant, especially nowadays. We have a residential road along there, it's not narrow, but it is narrow. When you get a lorry coming down in a car, the car normally has to stop a little bit. And I feel that the size of the business is just growing and growing and growing. Due to his new contracts that he has taken on subsequently, which again I applaud him for, I just feel that maybe the businesses are just getting a little bit too big for a area that is residential with a school, and as we are all aware, 25 new houses are being built in the Hicks land. It's not a business area, it is purely residential. Mixed businesses have grown over the years, and obviously he's had to extend his business area to accommodate for new people, etc., etc. If this is approved by the committee, I would be grateful for if any future applications ever come up that my concerns are taken into consideration.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak on the second one as well in a minute? We'll wait till we get there if you do, because obviously it's...
I'm happy to take my same discussion for both.
Okay, thank you, Emma.
Position that Angus was with the previous application. May I just ask Simon a little bit about the principle of development, because this is something I haven't quite got my head around. Our own core strategy policy, CP11, really is not in conformity with this. It seems to me paragraph 8 on page 74 suggests that there's a conflict. And as I understand it, that needs to be set alongside the National Planning Policy Framework, which has this assumption in favour of sustainable development, including in rural areas. And I'm just trying to work out how these two relate to each other, because our own core strategy is trying to prevent development in the countryside beyond settlement, and yet here we have the National Planning Policy Framework seemingly promoting it. How are we to reconcile this? Does this completely undermine our own core strategy policy?
Policy CP11 is worded to not be a blanket ban. It says development is not normally permitted. So the intent or the aims and the objectives of the policy is to prevent encroachment and protect the countryside. And ordinarily that's achieved by limiting the amount of development, but it's not a blanket ban. In this case here, there is existing development in the countryside, and it is weighed up against the existing development and weighed up against the intent of the NPPF, which is, to a degree, slightly stronger in terms of its approach in terms of development in the countryside, but it is still consistent. And the other item here is that this application, if you're looking at the rear of the site here where the blue circle is, and generally across the wider site, there is no limitation about the storage, external storage of items. So this application was weighed up against that. You'll note condition 4 limits the parking areas, which is different to the storage area. So it was perceived that, okay, we can look at the amount of external stored items on that site versus what we'll have in front of us now, which is a limitation to parking only. So the intent would be that there'd be less items stored outside.
Just Stephen, the other thing, of course, is that, like it or not, in the hierarchy of things, NPPF is more recent than our own policy, and of course also in most people's eyes NPPF is dominant to our own policies. So I think I fully accept your point that it is there's almost a slight dichotomy there.
It does seem exactly so, that there's a bit of a problem now created for our core strategy, policy CP11. But I think I have to accept that this National Planning Policy Framework, it's a bit of a mouthful, takes precedence over our own local plan. But I'm a bit troubled that our attempts to stop development in the countryside are being effectively undermined by this national policy. And I just wanted to come back, if I may, just to clarify my understanding of our core strategy policy, CP11. And this relates to what I've assumed you use the word normally, Simon, and I take it, therefore, there's a presumption in favour of the policy preventing development unless there are special circumstances to justify it. And I was a bit puzzled that the special circumstances in this case seem to be that the development was there already, but we hadn't given it planning permission. So I'm just troubled that we've got ourselves in a position where something we wanted to refuse is going to go ahead.
I think the special circumstances don't fail to distinguish between greenbelt special circumstances, where the protection afforded is very much greater than plain old countryside that we have across much of the borough, including this site.
Yes, I just wanted to add that if this was a green field and there was no existing development, then we would be refusing it and looking to take enforcement action. But this this site is already developed. There are existing authorised industrial uses, and external storage could take place all over that site, and we would have no control over it. by granting this permission, we gain more control.
Noting we'll come on to it later, but the application at Heath, we have an application for Heathlands Farm, and one of those is in some ways very similar. It's to provide cover or building to go over existing open storage, which is often not very attractive to look at. So.
Thank you. Could I please seek clarification on the numbers of vehicles parked on the site? On page 76, it stated off-street parking standards require 12 car spaces and 3 HGV spaces, and that indicative drawings show these could be achieved. However, on page 73, it stated there's likely to be in excess of 50 parked vehicles, with waste collection trucks making up the bulk of these vehicles. On page 77, it's written there are an abundance of vehicles across the site. If approved, the applicant would be required to provide a parking plan within 1 month of approval. Given the quotes that I've just said, suggesting that current parking needs exceed minimum requirements, that the additional units may add to parking needs, and the proximity to a school and 25 new homes to be developed nearby, should we seek a detailed, thorough analysis of current, actual and projected parking and a detailed parking plan before granting approval?
There's two historic permissions for the site that are both outside the area of this application. One of them is to limit the number of movements on and off the site to 7 in and 7 out, Monday to Saturday. That relates to a better service, which is the waste management business, which is across the majority of the site. There's also a condition on a more recent application which states the number of vehicles to be parked on the site being 6 vehicles. 6 wheel, gully and cesspool emptying vehicles and 9 staff cars associated with better service. That is specific to the business. The site has expanded since, and it also has incorporated other uses. So it is a fairly unknown factor. My site inspection did indicate, and you can view that on the aerial view there, that there is an abundance of vehicles. I didn't attempt to measure them or count them. This application does generate a certain number of parking spaces for the use. It's further complicated by the fact that by expanding the parking area, you're reducing the area that is able to be used for external storage. So, yes. So there would be most certainly likely to be a departure from the 2 previous conditions. A, because of the number of vehicles parked on the site, and B, just anecdotal comments from residents in terms of the number of movements that are going on off the site, and enforcement will deal with that in due course. In relation to this application, there is a requirement for 12 car spaces, but that is in excess of, or separate to the rest of the site, which is subject to various other applications.
Andrew, you also mentioned the 25 new houses. Of course, this site has been in existence with a number of approvals prior to that being approved. So it would be very difficult to say that now 25 houses have been approved. That should in some way restrict the existing site, because in essence it was operational prior to those houses coming along. But, okay. Rochelle, next.
Since this is a retrospective application, how long have these vehicles been there? And if they've already been there for a while, I don't think making more trips than they are now. If you put over, I can't understand how that would increase the amount of traffic on the road. And as far as I can't imagine parking on the streets there. How long your car would exist there? The roads are narrow and up and down there. So I'm assuming they already have spaces for all the drivers who come in and out of that site, because otherwise, where would they be? And it would clog up the streets amazingly. So I'm not quite sure I understand all of those things. And lastly, with climate change, we like housing near employment sites, so they don't have to drive as long a distance and don't have to pollute the atmosphere quite as much. So my question is, how does this affect all the application?
Be a bit more specific as to what
Well,
affects
since this
every-
is retrospective,
Yes.
how can there be any more vehicle access in and out if the vehicle's already there now, in and out? So it can't be any more than they're planning on hiring out their air industry more. Next, there's no the parking questions that Andrew was talking about. I can't understand. 12 spaces seems fine. If it's already there and they're already parking there and they're not parking out on the street, why would there be more parking needed?
I think to
It
some
doesn't make any sense.
I think to some extent, Rochelle, you've answered your own question.
It's retrospective, so it requires assessment of the building that's there and the traffic implications that arise from that. So we are to consider any of the existing impacts upon the road network. In answer to that question, this building here, which I'm showing, which is where the cursor is from 2014. So these buildings here are after that date. So this additional area expanded further back after that date. So it is not immune from enforcement action. I wouldn't be able to comment on that. The two vehicles parked in front of this site here are the film hire. So the business that occupies 2 of the 3 units is a film hire business, and they hire out firefighting equipment. So there's a fairly low movement of vehicles. They generally leave and come back a week later. So they're used for film shoots. Yeah, but the actual permission goes with the use rather than, sorry, it goes with the use class, not the actual business. So
I would also draw members' attention to the table on page 70, which details some of the planning history of the site, and you'll see that certainly this site appeared to be in commercial use by about 1990. So it's been in place for around 30 years in some way, shape or form, albeit no doubt it's, as Emma has indicated, it's probably intensified over that time. Okay, Chris, do you want to speak next?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to paragraph 83 of the MPPF and CP11. Because my reading of it was, and I think this is what Marcia was saying, that there is no conflict and that CP11 is concerned with starting up new businesses, whereas the MPPF paragraph is concerned with expansion. So I guess what the government's trying to do is to ensure that businesses in the countryside are not stymied against competition through their location, but at the same time allowing us to protect the countryside as best we can from actual new businesses. So I think in this case, paragraph 83 is the one which does apply.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we're beginning to go around in slight circles, but the application is 3 buildings. The parking is almost ancillary to that, but I think we always have problems with incremental development of a site and the businesses. And of course, the uses that we may approve tonight aren't necessarily going to be the same businesses that are going to be there next week, next month, next year. So I think we have to take whether planning officers believe that the site is big enough to accommodate the additional 3 buildings which retrospectively have been put there. And I guess if nothing's being parked outside on the street, which obviously would have been noticed and would not be ideal, then we must accept that there's going to be coming and going on this site. I've just got one question, just to convince me we're going on the right lines here. The position where these 3 new buildings have been positioned, has that always been part of the curtilage or the red line of this site?
You're asking, in essence, is the site gradually expanding? Because clearly it's surrounded on 2 sides by further countryside. Yeah.
In the past 7 or 8, 9 years, yes, but beyond that, no. It has expanded, and that's evident on Google Earth imagery. It's expanded from about halfway down the site in the past 20 years. So if I draw a line about there, around about there, that's where the general site was maybe 15 years ago. And that's a rough estimate. I would need to bring up Google Earth to demonstrate it further.
Does that then have any relevance to this application?
This application's assessed as though it's a proposal rather than, so the fact that it's retrospective has no bearing on its assessment.
Sorry, that it wasn't the retrospective that was my concern. My concern is the fact that that site has been extended. Is that fact at all relevant to our consideration of this planning application?
I think that, as Simon said, it was 15 years ago. So that is beyond our control now. If it was recent, then it could affect, yeah.
Just the other point to point out is obviously that expansion that's taken place is taking the site further away from the residential part because it's primarily alongside the railway. Just thought I'd draw that to your attention. Next is Carl.
Thanks. Just my couple of points, really. The site has obviously been used for industrial uses for quite some time, so I can see why the countryside, I'll use the word ban, but I recognise it's not a ban, is kind of waylaid. I can see that. I also see, I mean, if I was making this decision as well, you know, in terms of, this was a new site, it's right next to the railway as well, which is obviously quite a big development, and has been there for a very long time. So, yeah, you know, the weight of it kind of diminishes. Yes, but I am quite uneasy about this, just generally. Not enough to say that we shouldn't allow this, but you know, it's retrospective, and the next one is also retrospective, and it's a different part of the site, which kind of, you know, implies to me this is somebody running this business who's not really coming to us and you know, asking for decisions to be made before they actually carry out work.
You might be slightly preempting. I was going to suggest an informative that perhaps reflected the committee's reservations about the way that they've gone about this.
I was about to say, you know, kind of what Councillor Hobbs said about future applications. I'm sure the officers look at every application in the same way, with the same meticulous look, but you know, if we have future ones for this, I think they need to be looked at with this background. I was a bit worried about the thing in paragraph 29 on page 77 about talking about the movements, and it is possible that a better service no longer complies with this condition, which kind of says, yes, they're doing more than that, and that's a condition. So that worries me a bit, but it's just an addition to the uneasiness there, really. I won't labour that point either. The question I'd like to ask, though, is on the same page, 77, paragraph 33 at the bottom, which is talking about the ecology and saying that it's the site adjoins Sandpit Copse, a local wildlife site, and the ecology officer has reviewed this and suggested that an ecological assessment would have been needed if this was an application and it hadn't already been built, effectively. But as it hasn't been built, there's no problem. which I just find strange. I can see what the point is, that you can't really look for what the damage might be if the damage has already been done because you've got nothing to survey. I can see that. But again, this is just another addition to this uneasiness of, you know, we need to kind of make sure that people are coming to us before they do things so we can make sure it's done correctly.
Unfortunately, I think it isn't uncommon for this type of use or application in the countryside location to have an associated issue in terms of concerns about enforcement and gradual creeping expansion. By the very nature, it is somewhere more remote, and it's more difficult to monitor what's going on the site. I think the existence of Google Earth has assisted officers considerably in monitoring what actually happens. Abdul.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is, Class B8 uses, is that comply to all the existing business in operation, or can they change in near future if there's some other business coming to force?
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 10 buildings across the site, so they have varying uses. They're either B8 or B1. And if they meet permitted development requirements and there's no restriction to allow them, then they could, but my understanding is that they would need permission to vary between B1 and B8.
Page 77, if you see paragraph 3, it says more generally, Class B use implies low traffic movement. So that was my concern, that if they could keep on changing, the traffic movement will be higher.
Traffic generation would generally be higher for a B1 use because that's like typical offices. But B8 is storage and distribution, so the trip rate is usually quite low. It's in this particular case with the floor space, it's less than one movement in the P car, and that's a combination of cars, LGVs and HGVs. So because it's quite a small size of building and because the trip rate's very low for B8, it's sort of minimal impact.
Okay, I think that's all the speakers who wanted to speak. As I indicated when Carl spoke earlier, I was going to suggest an informative that along the lines of the Planning Committee strongly encourages the applicant to ensure that future applications are not retrospective. Would members please indicate that they'd support the addition of such a... I think that's okay, so we'll add that in there. There are other, I think, justifiable concerns expressed by local residents about the site not fully complying with all the hours of operation conditions. Clearly that is not a matter that we can consider for this application, but I would suggest that we can separately, perhaps I'd ask Marcia, could you raise this with enforcement? Because if we apply conditions, we should not let people ignore those conditions. So I think that's all we'll simply say there. Okay, so, yes. Sorry, Stephen.
Sorry, Chairman, this is not really another informative, it's my informative perhaps to the officers. A good way of looking at the site is to get on the train, drive it to Reading. You can see the whole site very clearly, and it is actually a bit of a worry that it is expanding effectively and intensifying its use.
Okay, members, so draw your attention then to this application, which is application. Sorry, you had another point you wanted to make, please, very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say that this site has always been owned by Mick Bicknell since I've been in Charvel, which is 1989. So I've been there a long time. And every time I've asked Mick to do something, he has done it for me. Yes, I know there's been complaints about some of the movement of lorries, but as I said in my first thing, my main concern, and I'm happy to talk to him directly about this, his businesses are getting bigger and that maybe a new site, he needs to find a new site.
All right, thank you for that. So members, could you please indicate with the addition of the informative that you approved earlier, that we approve planning application 192648. And that is also unanimous. Thank you, members. So we now come on to an application on the same site, which is 192713. I'm hoping that as we've had a good discussion about the former, that a lot of your potential queries about this application will have already been addressed. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, the blue line is the incorrect building. It is the one to the right of that. So I'm hovering the mouse over it now. Apologies for that. It's for a single warehouse building, 128 square metres. Viewed on the right of that photograph there. Used by Rabbit Hire Vehicle Hire. They are a business that operates off-site, and they store paperwork, vehicles, some vehicles occasionally. So the application is retrospective for the retention of the same building. The same concerns were raised by Councillor Hobbs. The same conclusions are drawn with this application in relation to the previous application, with the exception being that this building is smaller in footprint and more contained within the site. So it is considered to be acceptable, subject to the conditions included in the agenda.
So, members, does any member want to add additional, raise any additional points? This is again, if you like, a formalisation of an existing position. Carl.
Sorry, just a question just popped into my head. I don't think it's relevant to the discussion, so you probably rule it out of order, but how did we know about this retrospective buildings? Did the applicant actually ask themselves, or were they spotted and suggested to, or was there enforcement action?
I would imagine that it's as a result of enforcement action, but I don't know whether Marcia or Simon, whether you can clarify that.
I dealt with the applications for the caravans, which arose, these are the formal layout of the caravans, which arose from a previous certificate for illegal, unauthorised caravans in a different location. So these two applications arose from my site inspection.
Just request that we add the same informative to this application as we put on the previous one.
In that case, members, with the addition of the same informative as for the previous application, could you please indicate whether you support application 192713? And that is also unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, we now come on to another double application, and this is at Heathlands Farm, which is, I think, that's Woking Without, I believe. Yes, it is. Simon, you're doing this one as well, I think, aren't you? Yes, okay. Right, so.
Thank you, Chair. The application involves a 453 square metre extension to an existing pack house building, so it also has B1 and B8 use. It's shown here in the blue circle. It forms part of a wider soft fruit farm that measures 82 hectares across this farm here and across the road up outside the red line boundary on the other side of Heathlands Road. You'll note there's also to the right of the pack house mobile homes that house seasonal workers. There are also 6 other locations for rural workers' dwellings in the immediate vicinity of the site. The existing building dates from 1960s. It has expanded significantly over the course of the past 60 years. It's now required to accommodate an expansion of the packaging and the processing of the fruit. It should also be noted the existing pack house does have permission from a previous application to import 540 tonnes of produce onto the site to be dealt with in the same pack house. There were no objections to this application from internal or external consultees, the parish council, the ward member, or from neighbouring residents. The closest residents being along the northern side of Honey Hill at the top of this map here. The existing site here is shown on the photograph here. It's currently housed by a polytunnel that'll be removed. The mobile homes are at the right of the photograph here. It is on existing hard standing, so there's no additional soft landscaping lost. The main issue being whether the proposal meets policy CP11 and any traffic implications from that. So, like the previous applications, the principle of the development is acceptable on the same, generally on the same grounds of being a departure from CP11, but being consistent with paragraph 83 of the MPPF. The business is a fairly sizable business employing a large number of permanent and seasonal workers. More generally, the site is within, removed from the property boundaries. It's not visible from vantage points. Traffic is subject to previous conditions limiting the amount of imported produce to 540 tonnes. That's from a 2007 application, and there's also a Section 106 agreement relating to access not being via Honey Hill. So any HGV movements are to be via Heathlands Road. So those two stipulations still apply to this application because they are related to the existing pack house. It is recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the agenda being replications of relevant previous conditions from previous permissions. Thank you.
Just before we come on to the registered speaker, could we just get I guess then we're saying that because of the existing condition restricting the amount, the tonnage that can be imported to the site, although this will provide a bigger packaging plant, it will, there shouldn't be any increase in traffic as a result, presumably. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. It would limit the amount of additional movements coming to and from the site from produce that is grown off-site. So this application, or the assessment of the application, recognises that there may well be additional movements from increased output from existing site, and because it's used by Heathlands Road and that's an acceptable manner of route, then that's fine.
So could I now call Peter Izod, the agent, please, to speak? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'm representing Hall Hunter Partnership on this occasion. Would it be in order to, for my comments to cover both applications? Otherwise, I will be repeating myself basically on that. Most of you are probably aware of the standing of the Heathlands farm operation. It's one of the largest soft fruit producers in Britain and services all the major supermarkets throughout the UK. And it's grown obviously over a 50-year period nearly. We have a very sensitive and aware client involved on this site, and what is proposed here is a further tidying up of the operation in a sense. Both sites are on existing hard standing, and the Unit A on the left is a storage building which currently there are large stacks of pallets and all sorts of packaging material which is in the open. You can see it on that photograph there, and the idea is that that goes inside the building. It's virtually on the same footprint. And on the other side of the site at Unit B, again there's some temporary cover, and it's that stretch again on hard standing that the packaging facility will be sited or proposed to be sited. Both sites are well screened from surrounding areas and will be compatible with the existing construction. That's really all I need to say.
Thank you very much. Got two ward members on the planning committee.
I defer to the senior member for working.
Okay, all right. So Angus, would you like to speak first?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've known this site ever since it was a pick-your-own site, and that was now on your plan, where it now says garden centre, which was separate. I think it is one of these businesses which has been immensely successful, and I think should have our support. As Peter Izard said, the buildings themselves are replacing things that are outside, which are both, although they're not visible from anywhere else, is not the ideal way to carry out such a business. Just for a point of accuracy or information, the start of the summary talks about Heathlands and Bircham Inham site. The Bircham Inham site is outside the red line of this, it's the other side of Heathlands Road. But as is also mentioned, that the organisation has a number of different sites. There's one or between Twyford and Wargrave. There is a large number of lorry movements. They do go up Heathlands Road. If they manage to negotiate the traffic lights off 9 Mile Ride without knocking anything down, which they do with fair regularity. And a lot of those are even lorries that come from abroad for repackaging as requirements in this country. What I look forward to, and perhaps we can't introduce it into this application, is that when the Southern Distributor Road comes online, we will be able to get a much safer and better access for all the operation of Hall Hunter than coming off the 9 Mile Ride with this tortuous turn on the traffic lights on Heathlands Road. But I support the application.
Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Simon explained that in many ways the planning issues relating to this site are very similar to the ones we discussed in relation to the applications in Charville. And that's certainly true, although I was going to say there are some important differences, and one of them it's not retrospective, but the other also is that these are really fairly discrete extensions to the existing build. They're not going to be very visible from anywhere as far as I can see. That was not the case with the previous application. One question I have relates to this definition on page 109, paragraph 5, of imported produce. I find this slightly puzzling. It's imported if it's grown outside Woking and Borough Council area. But if it's grown within, it's not imported. So if it's driven down from Wargrave, it's fine. It doesn't count in the 540-ton total. But if it's coming from Henley, it does. So I find this puzzling. Why not just say anything coming in is imported?
The slight disadvantage we have here, that was a condition applied in 2007 under the reference that quoted there. So I'm not sure there's anybody in this committee who could actually give you an explanation as to the reason why. But I agree it doesn't. Sorry?
You probably are in 2007.
I'm not sure I was then, but I don't. That is a condition that's in place. We're not really in a position to I don't think there's anybody here who could answer that. I'm assuming, Simon, you have no idea? Yep. Okay. Was there another point you wanted to make? No. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. I guess.
If my recollection is correct, it was around vehicle movements prompted this.
Yes, but why only from within? Why are vehicle movements in the borough excluded?
Well, I think that was a crude way of referring to Spanish lorries, probably.
Also anything from 300 metres to the east in Bracknell. Okay, right, doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, just for members' information, you may have noticed this, I think the applicant has probably rather got a little carried away. The description of the site, which is 82 hectares on each side, in total on either side of the road, it refers to the site where it seems to imply that there are 400 permanent and 2,000 seasonal staff. I understand that that is across all 11 of the sites that they have in the UK. So I think it would probably be, I think the mobile homes will be stacked 10 deep in order to accommodate that number of people there. So I think we're seeing a description of the site and then an addition of other information about their business, which perhaps is perhaps a little misleading. Are there any other members wishing to speak on that? Chris, would you like to say anything further on it?
No, I just concur with Angus's recommendation. That's not working. I agree with what Angus said, so okay. Fine.
All right.
We should approve this forthwith.
So, members, any further speakers? No. In that case, application 192244, could you please indicate whether you would support this application? And that is unanimous. And if we may move immediately on to the associated application, unless there's anybody wishing to raise separate points on the application that starts on page 125. I assume, Mr. Izod, you don't wish to raise any other points on that?
If I may, I can clarify the employment situation as far
that would be useful.
As this immediate site is concerned. There are 450 staff employed at Heatham's farm. As you said earlier, the totals quoted are for the whole business. 120 full-time, 330 seasonal.
To repeat my question, do any other members wish to raise any points on this? I think we've seen, if we go back to the drawing there, it makes it very clear the area that is being covered. We've seen from the slides that there's large stacks of pallets and storage materials, and I think it will improve the appearance of the site. So members, no one else wishing to, sorry, no, sorry, you were voting early, were you? It may be Christmas, but there's no need to vote early, right? Okay. Could members please, could members please indicate whether they'll support planning application 192245? And that is unanimous. And lastly, planning application in Sonning. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry? We've done both. Yeah. Thank you for the people from Sonning from having to. I can assure you, this is. We're making good progress. Some of our planning committees go on till 11 o'clock. So we now go straight across, Simon, to you to take us through the planning application in Sonning.
The application site relates to two existing sites containing two dwellings, one being the atrium, which is on the left of this red line, and Poole Court, which is on the right. The atrium has been subject to a approval for a replacement dwelling and subsequent variations. Poole Court was also, an application was lodged for the replacement dwelling for that, but the application was refused and dismissed at appeal because it determined that it was a non-designated heritage asset. So its retention was sought because of the architect that designed the dwelling warranted its retention. This application relates to three main aspects: the modification to the landscape scheme across both sites, the incorporation of a swimming pool within a raised, partially raised area immediately to the north of the atrium building, and the retrospective approval for the raising of land in front of Poole Court. You will notice the swimming pool in this area here. Landscaping is summarised in the officer report. I won't go into detail in terms of what is proposed. And then the area up here is where the landscaping is proposed to be, the ground levels are proposed to be increased. In addition to that, there are other aspects that form part of this application. The curtilage of the site of the atrium, it would be increasing, as you can ascertain from this site plan. So the site boundary has moved towards Poole Court, and it does move around the tennis court and the outbuilding associated with that. There are a few examples of why that is occurring, one of them being the path leading from the driveway to the atrium. This application does not seek to move the boundary, or it does not seek to change the curtilage of the applications. Both sites are owned by the same owner, so it is possible to walk between the two sites, so that doesn't form part of this application. The atrium is currently under construction. You'll view the swimming pool right here. This is viewed from Pool Court, looking back towards the tennis court and the atrium. And this here is the raising of the land around the pool court. The non-designated item is the dwelling here. Looking back towards the River Thames in the distance here in the top photograph. The boundary along where this fence line here is, here, and along this photograph here, you'll notice the hedging there is the boundary between the settlement edge and the countryside beyond. The area, both properties are both in a conservation area. These are photographs taken, minimally zoomed in from the Thames towpath. So you'll notice the raising of the ground level in front of Pool Court, and you'll notice the various works currently under construction at the atrium. An objection was raised by the ward member and by Sonning Parish Council and by two neighbours. The majority of the concerns can be referred to as the raising of the land in front of Pool Court, the loss of landscaping to both sites and the harm that this caused to the area, to the countryside and to the conservation area. The loss of outlook from neighbouring property in relation to the removal of landscaping, drainage implications due to the change in ground levels, and use of the outbuilding adjacent to the tennis court here. There are no concerns on any of the above grounds. Majority of the issues, the remaining issues raised by residents have been amended, or removed or amended in revised plans. It is viewed that the landscape setting is acceptable once it is implemented. It is felt that a large number of the majority of the concern is in relation to the removal of landscaping on the site as it currently stands, including the removal of a hedgerow in between the tennis court and the dwelling house here. So once they are implemented, the proposal will be acceptable. It is visible from the towpath as noted, but it is not unacceptable. The raising the ground level is also visible but not unreasonable, including on drainage grounds. Condition 3 requires additional lighting details, and Condition 4 requires landscaping details. You'll note on the members' update that these have been amended to 2 months to account for the fact that we're in the December holiday period. Condition 5 also requires additional details in relation to ground levels. This is to bring all the previous applications together under this application and to provide a bit more clarity across all those applications, and because part of the works are retrospective. It is recommended for approval subject to the members' update and the conditions in the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Simon. So we've got three people registered to speak. Firstly, could I call Trevor Fisher from Sonning Parish Council? Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I speak on behalf of the Sonning Parish Council. The Sonning Parish Council has felt very strongly about this application right from its inception, and as such, we've recently taken professional advice over the problems we've had with it. Starting on a positive note, we'd like to say that we particularly appreciate the withdrawal of the tennis court lighting. That's very positive in our respect. But also note that the plans before the committee are not the final version. Condition 3 to do with lighting, and Condition 4 tree planting, and the tree planting plan and implementation requires further submission of the plans and subsequent consideration approval by the planning officer. The planning history for the atrium pool court has very much been build first and submit retrospective application later. We would like to see an end to that. The submission by the applicant's agent, Mr. Gould, in support of the application, states that the land has only been raised between the atrium and Poole Court. I have visited the site and seen it from Star Court, which is the adjacent property, and this seems to be incorrect to me. It would seem that the land has been raised considerably on the northwest side of the atrium. That's the part away from Poole Court, and that's the photos that I've asked to be reproduced and in front of you. If you look at the wall, the horizontal wall, the first photo shows it before the land was raised, and the land slopes gently down towards the river. The land is now flat, so it's very much changed the aspect as you look out from Star Court, and that's a big concern to the resident there. I also feel that it does affect the soft edge of the conservation area with the raising of the land in that position. So for these reasons, the Sonning Parish Council requests a deferral of the application so that the amended plans can be put forward for public consultation. One positive thing in Mr. Gould's submission, Mr. Gould, the agent, does offer the inclusion of a condition preventing the use of the outbuilding, the one that's adjacent to the tennis court, as a separate dwelling house, and the Sonning Parish Council would very much like to see that included as a condition. And the fact that the tennis court lighting has been withdrawn, could another condition please state that this cannot be added at a later date? We feel there's no place for that type of lighting within the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Adrian Gould, the agent?
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I don't want to take too much of your time up tonight. The officer's report is obviously fairly detailed and provides a sound basis for approving the application. There's a couple of things I'd just like to clarify, either from the presentation or from the report. Firstly, in the summary section on page 143, and as referenced tonight, just want to make absolutely clear, members are aware, the previous application to demolish Poole Court was by the former owner, it wasn't by the current applicants. The second comment I just wanted to pick up on was in the character of the area section, which is 159, paragraph 32. Just wanted to clarify that the pathway that was referenced in that paragraph is actually outside of the root protection area of the nearest tree. With reference to the curtilage changes, again, I just want to be clear on that the movement of the boundary between the two properties, the reason it's not included in the application is because it doesn't require planning permission. It's not a material change of use to change the boundary between two residential properties. So just so we can be clear on that point. Turning attention to the objections that have been received, the raising of the ground levels, essentially it is the area between the atrium and Poole Court where levels have been raised. The area closest to Star Court is actually lower, where the replacement tennis court is actually lower ground than where the previous tennis court existed. And I can't believe on that basis it would be any more conspicuous to the neighbouring property. With regards to the landscaping, I don't know if you all received the letter I sent, but I attached to it an appendix plan which had details of the additional planting that's being proposed over and above what previously existed and over and above what was previously approved. Most relevantly, the rear boundary of the atrium was an open boundary. It was marked only by a post and rail fence. And there's the photograph which I showed in the letter I sent, where that is now being planted with a native hedgerow interspersed with new specimen trees. So in terms of the impact of the development from the towpath, I genuinely believe there'll be less impact as a result of this application than would have been the case previously. Certainly when... is that the last minute? Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. Just about drainage, just to say that drainage has been approved with building control. Conditions relating to surface water and foul drainage have also been discharged prior to commencement of development.
Hello there. Good evening, Chairman and Committee. I kind of reiterate really why I actually listed the application. Firstly, it was that the property at the atrium will be visible from the Thames towpath, especially since most of the hedges and trees have been removed, and it does seriously affect the scene by the river. There was going to be, by information that I had, an impact on drainage problems. And also mentioned about the tennis court lights, but they've now been removed. So that's one gone, which makes it a lot easier. Really, I just add, if these two concerns are addressed, then I wouldn't have any problems with the application, which does appear to be the case. Finally, I'd just like to mention that this has been, I think the officers mentioned this as well, that Sonning is in a conservation area, and I am determined to protect the unique character of Sonning Village, and make sure that's maintained for the future. Okay, so just really thank you for your time. That's all. Nice and short.
Thank you, Michael. Right, before we come on, could we just get clarification on a few points? The impact on the conservation area, how is that evaluated and balanced?
The tennis court lighting has been deleted, and that was for one reason being the conservation area. The balance of the application does involve mostly landscaping. The additional built form is limited to the swimming pool. That has been considered to be acceptable against the policies in the core strategy in the local plan. In addition to that, and noting the comment from the agent, there was an assessment of the change in the curtilage between the two properties in terms of the relationship with the non-designated heritage asset, and that was felt to be acceptable as well.
The mentions about views from the towpath, I'd see there's a condition in here relating to the landscaping and tree planting. Are you satisfied that we've heard that a number of trees have been felled? That's fine, presumably they were not protected. But are you satisfied that there's suitable alternative planting to minimise the impact on people using the towpath? Okay, just a couple of other final points before we throw it open. The condition in here about the use of the pool court outbuilding, and it's clearly ancillary to the main dwelling. We heard a request from Sonning that perhaps the condition should be beefed up, that it shouldn't be ever converted to a dwelling or used as a dwelling. Would I assume the condition 13, as it reads, would prevent anything other than that happening to the building without, it would have to come with full, they'd have to seek planning permission in order to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct. The members' update does make an amendment to that condition as well to remove its reference to pool court.
Yep, okay. And lastly, I think Sonning Parish Council asked about that they were pleased that the lighting had been, from the tennis court had been removed, but were asking for reassurance or what could be done to ensure it wasn't subject to a further submission. To the best of my knowledge, we can't preclude an applicant making an application for something in the future, can we? We can perhaps not view it favourably, but we can't actually preclude somebody making an application, I believe.
That is correct. We can't also restrict something that doesn't, like, if we're restricting tennis court lighting, it is an unlimited scope of restricting other aspects. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just ask a procedural question first of all? Bearing in mind that we've had two applications in Charville on the same site, separate buildings on the same site, two applications at Heathlands Farm on the same site for two separate buildings. I'm a bit puzzled why we've got one application which seemingly relates to two separate properties. I wonder whether you could explain why we've only got one application.
I'll leave Simon to do that, but as far as I'm aware, if the applicant owns both, I assume they're free to, at some future date, or even now, to remove a boundary between the two separate parts of the site and register the resultant land with the land registry as just one unit, as opposed to two units, which I guess are only referred to here separately because that's how they're known.
I can see that point, but the previous applications were on the same site, in the same ownership, and yet we had two separate applications. So I'm just puzzled by that.
Just get
The previous proposed buildings could have been shown on the same application.
Yeah. That helps. Two fees, yes. I didn't want to mention that, but I'm sure that caused some degree of happiness in the planning department. Could I just ask, I mean, a lot of this really rests on the robustness of the landscaping and whether this is going to mitigate the visual impact. I mean, I don't want to put ideas in anyone's mind, but effectively, condition 4 on page 145 does make it fairly clear that landscaping conditions only last for 5 years. So how robust is the protection we're able to secure here?
I think condition 4 is stating that if they die within the next 5 years, then they have to be replaced. So,
but not if they die 5 years.
More substantive landscaping involving engineering works is likely to require planning permission anyway, isn't it? If somebody at a future date wanted to start re-landscaping the site.
it's also a conservation area, so the removal of trees in a conservation area, as far as I'm aware, subject to planning permission anyway. They're protected under, the majority of trees would be protected in a conservation area.
Thank you. My questions also relate to landscaping and changes to the contouring in the land. I'm wondering what the specific reasons are for raising of part of the land, and I also noted the reference from the representative of from Sonning Parish Council that some land has been lowered and flattened. Is this change in landscaping and contouring in any way partly related to drainage matters? How confident can we really be that the changes in landscaping will not impact on drainage, including on neighbouring properties? There's references made to the patio and the driveway, for example, being made of porous surfaces, but there must be areas such as the tennis court and the pool surrounds that are unlikely to be porous and hence might contribute to drainage problems. My question really is, can we really be confident that the changes, fairly significant changes to the landscaping here, may not actually lead to flooding and other drainage problems for neighbouring properties?
Okay, I think I draw your attention to consultation responses at the top of page 150, where the WBC Drainage Department, they are professional drainage experts, have raised no objections to this. And I just remind us, whilst we may have reservations, and I'd understand that local residents may also have reservations, to the best of my knowledge, everybody in this room is a layman when it comes to drainage matters. And so we have to be, to a large extent, reliant on the professional advice of the officers, just as if it was relating to highway safety or something like that. Did you want to add anything to that, Simon?
I think there was a question there, the reasons for the raising the level, and in addition, the photographs here. I'd reiterate there is a condition under this application, condition 5, that requires the whole area north of the atrium to be retained as existing ground levels. The contours are on the site plan here, and whether or not there's been any changes at present is temporary in nature. They're required to meet, to match their existing ground levels, and that's to be certified by a survey. In relation to the pool court, my understanding is the intention is to attain a garden level that steps out onto the site, so it slopes slightly, but there's 2 levels here. That's purely the intention. And also in terms of the tennis court is an existing tennis court. It has just been lowered in level, so the tennis court has always been there. So the only additional hard surfacing is the permeable areas and the swimming pool. Sorry, the patio areas and the swimming pool.
Okay, Carl, I believe you want to speak.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go over a couple of points I think have probably been mentioned, but I'm not quite sure, not quite satisfied yet. In terms of land levels in the kind of northwestern corner, which was mentioned, just this photo, which is the before, effectively this is what it will return to. The view behind there will be the same pretty much. It won't be raised up like this. Is that what we're saying? The condition will apply to that?
In terms of ground levels, yes.
Okay. Obviously, yeah, there may be planting or something else.
On the right of the second photograph, there is what would appear to be the corner of the building, I think. So that might be the hoarding in the top right of this photograph here. So,
okay, yeah. Right, thank you for that one.
Beyond that, I couldn't confirm.
The other one is the tennis court lighting. I think you said that there was no way we could kind of restrict that in perpetuity, etc., which is understandable. Condition 3, which talks about lighting details in general, is that tennis court lighting not covered under that, really? Because that seems to say that the lighting scheme needs to be improved in writing. Would that not cover that, or?
The condition is an ecological condition that comes from the previous application for the atrium, and because it was expanded across both sites, it was considered to be relevant here because there's a level of ambiguity. So it wasn't in relation to the tennis court lighting at all, no.
Okay, so effectively that wouldn't stop someone putting lights in as long as they came within, they were the right throw or the right level of lighting and so on. I'm just considering the point that I think that the Shinfield Parish Council basically asked for a condition to restrict the tennis court lighting. So we're saying we can't do that, but I'm trying to work out what this would do, this condition, whether it would do that job or not.
To exclude somebody making a future application
Oh,
to
yeah,
do
absolutely.
something. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But I think they were asking for a form of words in here that basically said, under this application, you are not permitted to, etc.
I guess what Simon, are you able to give us assurance that the condition 3 would not allow somebody to introduce tennis court lighting without it coming back for a separate application here?
Yes, the condition here relates to external lighting around patios and at the driveway entrance, which would be within the scope of the planning permission. What would be proposed is development, which would require a new planning application, being lamp posts and intensity of lighting that would be not within the scope of the planning permission.
Okay, thanks.
Do any other members wishing to speak? Any members wishing to propose any amendments or changes to the application as it stands in front of us? I see no one indicating. So, therefore, yes, sir.
Proposal for amendment, but as we've gone in for informatives a bit this evening, I wonder whether an informative might be added relating to the preservation of the landscaping in a conservation area, just to draw attention of the applicant's attention to the fact that the standard condition may only last 5 years, but because of the conservation area status, the landscaping is protected.
Condition 10 may go some way in terms of addressing that concern. It may need to be reworded slightly to accommodate what you're suggesting.
I wanted some specific reference, if this is appropriate, to the conservation area status and how that affects the trees.
I was wondering, Simon, whether possibly where we have the condition 10, and obviously as with all conditions, we then give a reason for that condition. I wonder whether we should add that into the reasons for the condition being applied, because there's no specific reference here to conservation areas, is there?
No, but I can't say with 100% certainty that my advice that I gave before was entirely correct. So in terms of conservation areas, it may be the height of the trees or the size of the trees or the type of trees in a conservation area. There has been enforcement have been involved in the removal of a previous tree, so I do understand that was because of its conservation area location. But beyond that, I couldn't confirm entirely. I can take account of that and then add it in if it is correct, which I assume it is. But
consent's required to remove a tree in a conservation area when the girth, the width of the trunk is over a certain amount. But we could certainly, in this reason, add in.
Sort of make it a bit more of a.
Yes.
Should we say clarify the reasons and
yes.
elaborate a little as to the thinking behind it? Yeah. Would that be something that we could do offline, so to speak? Would you be satisfied with that, Stephen?
I would be satisfied. I'm just seeking some additional securities, yes. And I think that might be a way of doing so.
Okay. Yeah, that would be fine. The consent is required to remove a tree in a conservation area where the girth of the tree is over a certain size. So if it, I don't know off the top of my head.
We don't have a tree expert. Members, thank you for that. Now, if we could just go on to the report relating to recent appeal decisions, which you should have on the back of your members' update. As you know, we review recent appeal decisions, and